Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today here on this live science session. My name is Amy Defoe. I'm one of the science teachers here at Graduation Alliance, and I hope this is going to be a useful session for you. Today's agenda is we're going to take a look at genetics. So we're going to be looking at biology, and we're going to take a look at a couple of the different activities in that course, as well as just giving you a little bit more in depth, show you some examples, hear it in a different light. I'm going to explain genetics for you today. Before we get started, let's go through a couple little housekeeping items for you. First thing is that these are being recorded. These sessions are being recorded, and we keep these in a nice library where you can access them. Hey, thanks for joining. We're just getting started here today. I'm just going over some housekeeping items. My H's aren't coming out correctly. Let's hope that changes here. So again, like I was saying, is that we do record these so that, a couple different reasons. One is that we know that maybe, this time doesn't work for you, or maybe you can only attend for part of the session. And so, having this being recorded and set up in a library, you can go back and view it at a time that's a little bit more appropriate and works better for you. Also, maybe there's something we go over today. You have a question that you get answered and then go over it, and you want to come back and review that. You have the option to do that. You can also think about this as maybe you're not quite yet on the topic of genetics. Maybe that's coming to you next week or in your next course. And so you'll be able to come back, look in our library, and find the information that you need. It's pretty cool to think about, all the different courses that we have doing these live sessions. We have this great library. So as you continue taking different courses, you'll have the option to come back to these study sessions and get a little bit more information that you need, okay? The other housekeeping item, of course, is with the sound in your video. You're always welcome to, turn your video on, turn your video off, whatever you're comfortable with. Same thing with your sound. You can mute yourself with your microphone. You can unmute if you got some background noise going on. I do suggest that you hit that mute button just so that it doesn't come out. Everybody else can hear. Anytime you want to, though, you are more than welcome, and I encourage you to unmute yourself or use the chat. You can type in as well. Add to that conversation here with me today. I mean, so we're all working, doing our schooling, and sometimes it kind of feels a little distant. And here with these live sessions, we've got this kind of community role all together here. And so let's engage in that communication with each other. So, feel free to ask questions. I'm going to set up some time for you to ask questions. But, as we're going through and I'm asking questions and about genetics and assignments and whatnot, I do encourage you to share your ideas and share your input. And of course, get your your questions answered as we go through this today too. Okay, so let's take a look. First off, we're going to start off with talking about genetics. And looking at, hey, welcome. We're just getting started going over the agenda here. We're going to take a look at genetics and Punnett squares. And we're going to look at the first assignment we're going to look at is 331 that goes over genotype and phenotype. And sometimes I get a lot of questions about that, so I want to clarify that for you. Welcome. And then we'll open up for our first session of questions. And this is for you to ask any question about maybe something that we're talking about right now with genetics. It also is, if you have a question about what you're currently working on in your class or an assignment that's been kind of bugging you or you're not sure what to do, that's what that time is for. And we'll do 2 of those. And then we'll come back and we're going to look at this 3.52 inheritance letter and kind of applying genetics and action and thinking about genetics and genes in your particular family. And then we'll end with questions again so that you're set to go for the week in science. Sounds good? Awesome. Well, I thank you guys for joining here today, and let's get going. So move along here with my little slide here. So genetics, what do you think of when you hear genetics? So take a moment. I always like to start off the lesson or start off a topic thinking about it first. What do I kind of already know about it? I like to say activate our background knowledge. What do you think of when you hear genetics? And if you want to, you're more than welcome. You can use your chat. You can unmute yourself and shout out your idea. Okay, somebody wrote in here, heredity. Yep. DNA has something to do with DNA, sure does. What makes us who we are? Good. Okay, so you've kind of have heard these types of topics. There we got a couple more coming into that chat. Let me open that up. Yeah. Think of personality. When you think of genetics, yep, we're all kind of individual people. We all have characteristics that are individual to us and kind of make us who we are. Okay, and so what we're going to look at is then how does that work? How do we get these particular genes or this personality that we get? Okay, well, let's move along here. So genetics. Genetics, when we think of, when we define it, so if you looked up in a dictionary, it would tell you, oh, a couple more. Yeah, sometimes we can get traits that we don't want, huh? Yeah, so we can get good traits and we can get bad traits. It'd be nice if we could pick and choose, right? Someday, hey, that's part of thinking about science and technology as it's increasing, and it's something we can think about is, you know, can we pick the genes that we want? Selective breeding, kind of, sort of? Okay. Oh, you've got it, yep. So when we think about genetics and the actual definition of genetics,
there's a deal going on. If you attend a bunch of the live sessions, I could like chat over here and interact with the teacher. She's telling about like science and stuff. If I stay for half of it or like the whole thing, like I can look at a couple of them, I get a deal. I can like have like a pass on assignment. Oh, cool.
Yeah,
this is my first time joining the live
ticket. I'm gonna put you on mute here for a second. So yes, if you guys did hear that, yeah, this is a great thing to point out. Yep, we are offering kind of a little incentive reward program, so to speak, is so that you can, yep, if you attend these sessions, you can get that punch card, get it rolling, get those punches in. Yes. Okay. Good. And hopefully get some questions answered too, and get a little bit more information about science as well. Okay, so when we think about genetics, when we define genetics, it's the passing down of genetic information from parent to offspring. So that's the big thing. When we think about where do our genes come, where do our genes come from, or where do our traits, who we are, where does it come from? It comes from parent to offspring, and that includes all organisms. So we're not just talking about humans in here, okay? So all organisms have what we call as a parent, and then of course we have the offspring, okay? Now when we're talking about parent, I know sometimes when we think about this, maybe in humans, we sometimes don't always know, so to speak, our biological parent, and that's what we're talking about with our parent is who, which traits we got passed down to us. And what's important about that is that we get this genetic information. And genetic information are what we have in that genetic information is what we have as genes. And so you can see over in this image, because we're going to talk about genes and DNA and chromosomes, and you're like, whoa, it's way too much information. So I like to use this here to kind of help you see how it goes in together, okay? So genes are segments of DNA that code for a specific protein, okay? So genes carry that DNA. And then chromosomes are structures that DNA fit into. And in humans, we have 23 pairs. Okay, so that means we have 46 total. And the reason why we have pairs is because, of course, we come from a parent. So we get one from the male parent and one from the female parent. Okay, DNA is the codes. Now the codes are like the genetic information that gives you the coding for, say, brown eyes or dark hair, okay? So as we think about where is this genetic information at in our bodies? It's not in, you know, one particular place before. You're so good, don't worry. Yeah, it's awesome that you're joining. Sometimes when we do these first ones, I remember the first time I was using Zoom, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to touch anything because I was like so afraid I was going to lose everybody. Yep, you're good. Yeah, so we got lots of tools you can use. You can show your face, you can mute yourself, you can use the chat. Awesome. Thanks for joining. Okay, so what we're talking about, where these genes are, where this genetic information is. is we're talking about it's in the cells. So as we can see here, this is kind of going from the big picture to the smaller picture. So in each and every one of our cells, now you think about it, your body is made up of millions and millions of cells, and every one of your cells has this nucleus. We call it the command center. It's like the brain, so to speak, of each one of your cells. And inside that nucleus, you have these chromosomes. And if you were to take a chromosome and stretch it out, magnify it, magnify it, and magnify it, you can see kind of what they're doing here. They're magnifying it, they're stretching it out. What you're going to see, you've probably seen something that looks like this before. That's your DNA. Looks like a ladder that's all twisted up. And yep, that's your DNA. And so your DNA has little codes. It has these 4 different bases here, and how those bases line up gives you a particular code for a protein, which is going to be for your traits. So as we think about the reason why we have this here with our gene, a gene is going to be a segment of that DNA. So the DNA is the whole entire thing. In your DNA, you know, you've got so many different types of genes in there. Think about, you know, the different traits that you have. You're going to have a gene for each and every one of those. So a gene is going to be kind of a segment of it, segment of that DNA, okay? So again, where this genetic information is in all the cells. Inside that nucleus, we have chromosomes. We have 23 pairs of them, so 46 total. And then if we were to break that chromosome apart, we'd find the genes, which would be segments of DNA. Welcome everybody, awesome. We got lots of newbies, yay. Well, hope you enjoy these live sessions. And, you know, as I always say, as we go through live sessions that, you know, anytime you have an idea for a topic or, you know, where you're at in your science, please let me know. I do these every Tuesday at the same time, and I'm always looking for student input on what you guys would like to see. So think about that. Okay. So there we go. We talked about genetic information, the passing down from parent to offspring. We talked about where it's at. Now let's get to specifics here. Well, how does it make us who we are? And that's what these alleles are. So every organism has a set of genes that determine its traits. And like we said, these genes come in pairs because you got to remember you come from a male and a female, one from each parent. Each gene in a pair is known as an allele. Okay, so an allele is that gene that you get from both mom and dad, one from mom, one from dad, male, female. And that's going to tell you, you know, what your possibilities are for, say, like your eye color, your hair color, shape of your nose, your earlobes, those types of things, okay? Now, an allele can be either dominant or recessive. And what we mean by that is if one of the alleles masks or kind of covers up the other, it's called dominant. The allele that is masked by the dominant one is what we call the recessive. It's the one that we don't see. So you could be carrying an allele for something, but you don't see it. Some examples that we see, like with that is, you know, think of a pretty common one is like with eye color. So dominant eye color. What do you guys think is the dominant eye color for humans? They'll take eye color. What color do you think is dominant? Brown, yeah. You guys are quick to that one. Pretty much, yeah. So, you know, we can look at that and we can say, you know, we think about the human population and we look at what the majority of eye color is brown. So that tells us it's dominant. Now, you could have a dominant brown allele. Maybe the female passed down a brown allele for eye color, and maybe the father or the male passed down a blue allele. Now, blue is going to be recessive, okay? So usually, you know, we know there's some mutations. Things don't happen the way that they're supposed to, and sometimes you can, you know, you usually don't see one brown and one blue, right? It doesn't work that way. So that's what we're talking about when we have that dominant or recessive. The dominant allele is going to mask out that recessive trait. You're still going to carry it, you just don't see it. Kind of takes over. Yeah, cool, you learned that. Yep. Okay. So in this picture here of all these little cats, because, you know, genetics goes into play with all organisms here, You can see the mom, litter of kittens here. What do you think is the dominant fur color? You guys got it. Yep, that's right. Orange. So if we looked at here, we've got, 4 kittens, and 3 out of the 4 are, that orange color. So we would definitely say that the dominant color for these cats would be orange. So that means this little one here must have, some recessive alleles in there. Okay. Let's take it a step farther. Here we get into homozygous and heterozygous, and all that is talking about the alleles. Are they the same or are they different? Okay. When it comes to genetics, this is really weird. We use letters. We use capital letters and we use lowercase letters to represent the gene that we're talking about and to determine if it's dominant or recessive. Okay. If something is dominant, we give it a capital letter. If something is lowercase, we give it it's recessive. Okay. So capital letters are dominant, lowercase are recessive. Now, this is just a pea plant, and we're just using it as an example here, okay? So what we're looking at is different types of pea plants, tall ones, and we have short ones. And then you've got these big words up here. Don't worry about the big words. We'll break it down here, okay? So as we think about, you'll notice that, the first part is different in these 2 words, but the second part's the same, zygous. Do you guys know what this prefix means, homo? Yep, you got it. The same. Awesome. Thanks for the feedback today. You guys are great. Okay, so homozygous means same. So if you have a homozygous allele, that means you would have 2 of the same alleles. Hetero, apart, or different. Okay, so here we have an example of different because you'll notice we have a capital T and a lowercase t. So those 2 are different. Over here, we've got 2 examples of homozygous. We've got 2 dominant alleles, and then we have 2 recessive. So you'll notice that they're both the same. Okay. Now again, with alleles, we have 2 alleles, one from the male, one from the female, one from the mom, one from the dad. Okay. So far, so good. So what we're looking at here is we got some examples of some pea plants here. This particular pea plant is homozygous tall. So that means it has 2 alleles that are dominant. So it's written in a capital letter. This particular one is recessive, but it's also homozygous because it has 2 recessive traits. Now, to get a recessive trait to be seen, to carry it and for it to be seen, you have to have 2 recessive alleles. Okay, because if you had, as we see over here, here's our heterozygous pea plants, one tall, one short. Are these tall or are these short? Yeah, they're tall. Okay, so that tells us again it's dominant. So that dominant trait is going to cancel or block out, mask that recessive trait. So these particular pea plants that have been produced by these are all going to be tall because that dominant allele masks that recessive one. But they're still going to carry both of those traits. So then if these plants then later reproduce, they could pass down that recessive trait. So somebody in here talked about how both her parents have brown eyes, but their mother has green eyes. So that tells us that, yeah, somewhere in their family there's green eyes, and that tells us that that green eye is recessive, and that the mother must have had 2 recessive traits passed down from both parents for her to have those green eyes. It's pretty cool to think about. Okay, so again, homozygous means the same. Both alleles are the same. Heterozygous means you've got 2 different ones, okay? Capital letter means dominant. Lowercase means recessive. Let's move on here. So a little couple questions here. If you have capital P, now don't get confused about the letters. The letters just are representing something. So we could say the P could stand for peppered fur or something like that, the color, so to speak. The letters just represent, they don't mean anything particular. If you have two capital P's, would that be homozygous or heterozygous? We've got capital, yeah, you got it, capital P, they're both the same, so it's homozygous. If we have one capital B and one lowercase b, homozygous or heterozygous? Those two are different, that's right, so it would be heterozygous. So they're carrying both a dominant and a recessive. Same thing with this uppercase S and lowercase s. Heterozygous because it's carrying one of each, okay? Changing that question up here, which is dominant, which is recessive? If we have capital T and lowercase t, which one's gonna be the dominant allele? Got it, capital T. So capital letters represent the dominant trait, okay? With this one, these would both be two capitals, so two dominant, lowercase r's, two lowercase r's, recessive, okay? If one parent had brown eyes, and we're gonna say they're homozygous, because you'll notice that there's two capital B's, homozygous dominant for brown eyes, and one parent had blue eyes. Again, to have blue eyes, you have to have two recessive traits for it to be seen, okay? So we have homozygous recessive blue. What color would the offspring have? Ding, 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 you guys are quick. You got it, brown. Okay, awesome. You guys are on a roll, okay? So yes, that dominant allele is gonna mask out that lower one. Now, if those offspring, again, they're gonna both carry a capital B and a lowercase b, we're gonna see that dominant brown eye, but then they can reproduce and their offspring could have the chance to have that blue eye. Okay, so we talked about homozygous, heterozygous, and dominant recessive. The next part is genotype and phenotype. Big words in genetics, but they really have simple meanings, okay? So genotype is what makes the trait. So it's the actual alleles. So that capital B, lowercase b. Phenotype is what it looks like, what it appears, what we see with our eyes, okay? So genotype is what makes the trait. This is the information within a gene or genetic makeup of a specific organism. Genotype is determined by the makeup of alleles or the form of a gene that produces different effects. So the genotype, again, is going to be those two alleles that the organism carries, okay? Written in letters, two letters like we saw. Examples of genotypes and genes that were responsible. So we think about what are genetic traits. It could be eye color, hair color, height, how your voice sounds, can you curl your tongue, you know, your earlobes, the shape of your facial features, the color of your skin. Those are genetic characteristics that you're gonna have codes for your genotype. But phenotype is what we actually see. It's the visible or observable expression of the results of the genes, okay? So examples of phenotypes would be the same thing, eye color, hair color, height, sound, voice, so all the same ones. The reason why we have a difference here is because, like we've seen, is that, you know, your genotype could be that you carry, let's talk about eye color again. With that genotype, you could carry an allele for brown eyes and an allele for blue eyes, but your phenotype is going to be brown because brown is dominant. It's what you see. It's what you physically see in that appearance. Genotype is the codes for it. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at a couple examples of this. Genotype and phenotype to kind of visually see those two together. So the genotypes for each flower are listed below. Oh, purple, that sounds better than what I said earlier, peppered. Purple sounds better. Okay, so we've got some flowers down here. The genotype for each flower is listed. This one we have got homozygous, that means same. So we've got two dominant P's for purple. And then we have a heterozygous, because we have a dominant P for purple and a lowercase p for white. So there's a mix. And then we have homozygous recessive for white, 2 lowercase p's. Okay, so here's the genotype. Again, those 2 letters written out, the 2 alleles. Underneath them is the phenotype, and this is again what we're going to see. So as we think about if we have homozygous dominant purple, we see a purple flower. We have heterozygous, we get a purple flower. We have homozygous recessive white, we get white. Okay, so notice here that middle flower right here. Again, this is where genotype and phenotype can be different. This plant, this flower is carrying 1 allele for each, both purple and white. So in genotype, it's written that way. We get that heterozygous allele. But the way that the phenotype comes out is we get purple. So it's like that white goes away. So the white is being masked. Okay, so I wanted to show you that difference here. And genotype, again, the alleles. Phenotype, what we actually physically see, what the appearance is. Okay. From that, once you go from genotype and phenotype, you move into this little activity that asks you a couple questions about kind of putting those into action. So this comes from 3.3.1, inheritance in action, looking at traits. Okay. So I asked you to imagine that you're a doctor in a maternity ward. And during your last shift, there are 20 babies are born. 10 had blue eyes and 10 had brown eyes. 15 had round heads and 5 had pointed heads. Given the phenotypes, what are the possible genotypes for these babies? So again, phenotype is what we see. Genotype are the alleles. So to kind of help you through this here, let's just take a look at the eyes first. We're looking at brown eyes and blue eyes. Okay, so the possible genotypes for these babies, we know that if there's 20 babies, 10 had blue eyes and 10 had brown eyes. Right here, if we see blue eyes, we know we're going to have that lowercase. Yep, blue or BB. Yep, you've got it. Yeah, so yeah, these are our only 2 options that we could have. Because if there are 10 blue and 10 brown, we know that they're going to have to carry both of them because you got dominant brown and recessive blue. To have that recessive blue, you know that they both have to have this, okay? So in that case, the options for our genotypes would be, we would have a heterozygous, capital B for brown, lowercase b for blue. And then the other option is we would have a homozygous, lowercase bb. Okay, so sometimes when I see this, students will say, well, what about, BB? Well, we can't have a homozygous dominant because we've got blue eyes. So that tells us that it has to be a lowercase. Okay. Let's see, and then we had 15 had round heads and 5 had pointed heads. So we'll say, we'll use the letter R. So again, I'm talking about these letters. They don't mean anything. They're just letters to visualize what we're talking about with these alleles. So we're going to say 15 had round heads and 5 had pointed heads. Just based off these numbers, which one do you think is dominant, round or pointed? Yep, round. So we look at the population, we see more of them are round, so that's going to tell us round is going to have that capital. And we know that those 5 pointed ones are going to be that lowercase, okay? So again, they're going to be that lowercase because they are recessive. So if we've got dominant and we have recessive, we then know that that dominant one over here has to be a carrier of a lowercase or a recessive trait. Okay. So again, we couldn't have 2 round alleles. It would not happen because you've got recessive traits there. Okay. What traits do you think their parents probably have? Use what you know about dominant and recessive traits to explain your answers. Well, you guys kind of already did that already up here as we looked at this. 15 had round heads and 5 had pointed heads. We know that, the round head is going to be dominant because it's more of what we see. Okay. Same thing with our blue eyes and our brown eyes. We know that there has to be a heterozygous genotype in that parent to have so many blue eyes, which would be recessive. Okay. Okay. Skip over that one here. Just a little background on genetics before we move on here. Where did this all come from? Have you guys ever heard of Gregor Mendel before? Famous scientist. Awesome. Okay. Well, he's kind of the founder of genetics. Okay. He's the first known geneticist or scientist that studies genes. He did most of his genetic studies on pea plants. So he spent years and years and years pollinating pea plants to see kind of how the offspring would change based on how he pollinated them. Okay, so he would be the pollinator himself, and he would mix different combinations of pea plants and began looking at patterns of what the traits that the offspring had. And this goes into what we call probability. Probability helps us predict the chance that something is going to happen. So you think about, you throw a coin in the air and, what's the probability? It's going to be heads and it's going to be tails. And that's what he used. And he created a little tool called a Punnett square to kind of predict that, what would happen. Okay. We always see this, people say, well, what about children? So as you think about people having kids, a couple has 2 kids, how come one isn't a boy and one isn't a girl? I know that myself because I've got 2 little boys. So as we think about with predictions and probability, the more trials that you run, the more accurate it becomes. So as you think about 2 children and you have a 50-50 chance, the probability is that's a small trial number, so you're not actually going to see that ratio. Shucks, huh? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Okay, so his tool that he created is called a Punnett square. And what he does with a Punnett square is he takes the 2 genotypes, the alleles from the father, and he takes the alleles from the mother. And he makes it into this like little 4 square, and it's like a little equation, but we're using letters here. So we'll say the father's genes, here's his genotype. He's got a dominant B and a recessive B, heterozygous here. The mother has 2 homozygous recessive alleles. Okay, so then what we do is we just factor in. We kind of multiply them together. So we take this capital B, we take this lowercase b. We take this lowercase b and this lowercase b. B, B. We just factor in. And so what this tells us is based off of this combination of the father and the mother, their genotype, if they were to have 4 offspring, this is what the probability would be for their offspring. So let's say, we're looking at eye color again. So most likely they would have 2 brown-eyed kids and 2 blue-eyed kids. That kind of makes sense? Kind of weird to think about it. So it's just a tool that we use to kind of figure out the probability, the possible options of what the offspring would have. Awesome. You guys got it. Okay. Does anybody have any questions so far about what we talked about, or questions about something else? You can unmute yourself. You can use the chat. Oh, awesome. Yeah, so somebody was saying here that their grandfather taught them about Mendel cross-breeding their plants to try and find new variations. Definitely, yeah. I live here in Eastern Washington State, and we do that. And we hear about, I don't, but we hear about it. We're kind of known as the apple capital. And they do that a lot with the apples, is they'll take different types of variations of apples and they'll pollinate them together to kind of create new ones.
Can you hear me right now?
I can hear you.
Okay. So when you're like doing the phenotype with the letters, it doesn't matter what letter you use, right?
Nope, it sure doesn't. No, I just, whenever, usually what you'll see if you see examples or, you're writing it yourself, you'll see that they'll use a letter that kind of represents what it is. So, if you're looking at tall and short in plants, you would probably see a capital T or an S. Yeah, we just kind of help try and use something that helps abbreviate, but nope, the letters really don't matter. This could be an X. Yeah. Good question. Okay, I'm going to move on to one more piece here on genetics, and then I'll open it up for more questions as well. So the last little part that you get in this unit on genetics is they ask you to kind of be creative and write a letter. And so I go off and I just want to, talk about, I'm sure in English class you've done this before, think about all the different types of letters that you could write, So you're thinking about jobs, you could write a cover letter that would kind of showcase your qualities and interest in a particular job. Sometimes you write thank you letters to people. You can write a letter for your resume, letters of reference, maybe as you're applying to schools. Condolence letters, giving your apologies or your thoughts to somebody. And then of course, like informational letters, which is what we're going to be looking at. Basic format for a letter. This is not in the assignment, so no, there's not, you're not being assessed, so to speak, on, your letter format. This is just kind of reminding you kind of a skill as we're going through this lesson. Gives you kind of the 5 steps to writing a letter. You always start out with your heading, your address, your date. The salutation is that hello part of the letter. And then, of course, you have the body, and this is where you express your thoughts and your ideas. This is like the actual, right, information. And then, of course, you have your closing, your goodbye, yours truly, love, see you soon. And then, of course, your signature. This gives you another type, kind of showing you how that format is. And sometimes as we write letters, sometimes they're more formal, as we see here. And other times that they aren't. Okay, so in activity 3.52, we get this inheritance letter. And what they're asking you to do is to kind of apply your own personal genetics and kind of write a letter to your parents describing what you have. So it says, write a letter to your parents explaining how you received your genes. Use the information from the unit's text and videos and try to explain to your parents why you look the way that you do. And then it gives you, here is the requirements. So this is kind of like the checklist of what you need to include in your letter. So the first one is they ask you to describe which traits you think you inherited from your parents and an explanation of how you got your genes. What are dominant, what traits are dominant or maybe recessive in your particular family. So if you look at me, I should have a picture of my parents, and I have two brothers, kind of give you an idea. So in my family, when I think about what traits I inherited from my parents, we all have, these big round eyes. We all have dark brown hair. We all both have brown eyes. So in my family, thinking about dominant traits, all of us have it. So those would be examples of dominant traits. They want you to define the words gene and chromosome, that your parents understand them. So again, they're just asking for some vocabulary here. Describe how many genes and chromosomes can be found in the human body. So we talked about those 23 pairs. Imagine other traits that you have received from your parents. Maybe your father has brown hair, and your mother has red hair, and you have brown hair. Explain this to the best of your ability. So again, they're talking about here would be a chance where you could talk about dominant and recessive. Do you have these types of dominant and recessive traits in your family? Do you have, a parent, do you see this like one has brown eyes, blue eyes, and you have blue eyes or brown eyes. That's what they're asking here is, do you have any of those genotypes and phenotypes that might be different, so to speak? Okay. And one example in my family is my youngest son, he's got blue eyes, and I have brown eyes, and my husband has brown eyes as well. So someplace in there, we've got that recessive trait for blue. Okay, and then of course, if you have any siblings, or you could even think of, for example, like identical twins or twins that aren't identical, explain why, if you have siblings and you come from both the same mom and dad, how come you're not identical then? Okay, and the reason behind that, of course, is because there's so many different chances and alleles that are passed down from parents. So each time reproduction takes place, you're getting a different, whole new section or different types of alleles that are coming through that are passed down. So the parents can pass down different alleles each time that they reproduce. Okay, a couple things about this activity that I hear from people is some people say, I don't know, you know, maybe you were adopted, both my parents were adopted, and so for them to do this, it would be pretty hard for them to do. And so I don't want to say discourage you, oh, don't do the assignment, but rather think about what you can do. So in here, if you don't know your actual biological parents, you could still do certain sections of it, you know, define the words, you could do the vocabulary, you know, you could explain why siblings don't look the same. So there's parts of in here. And then I would just write in there, let your teacher know in the comments or in your actual letter, you know, this is as much as I can do based off of, you know, my own personal history. You're not going to be marked down off of that. Okay. Some people say, what about, you know, do I have to write a letter? Can I just give you the information? And, you know, as thinking about what our learning goal is, that's fine with me. So if you want to take out that letter piece and you'd rather just go down the bulleted list and write out your responses, that works for me too. Because again, what I'm looking at is, you know, the learning goal, explaining, do you have an understanding of genotype and phenotype? Okay. Live sessions last for, they're scheduled for an hour. Somebody asked a question here. So, yep. So the live sessions usually last an hour. Okay. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, anytime. There's sessions going on just about every day, and you're totally always welcome to, I know on your dashboards, you get the pop-up that shows you what live session is occurring if there is one that day, and you're always welcome to join any of them, even if you're not in that particular class or whatnot. Yep, they're open for everybody. Okay. Okay, so that's the idea of this. So let me show you an example of what that looks like, okay? So here we've got more of a formal letter. So as we can see, you know, we've got the address it's going to and the date. And here is the letter from the person that they are sending. They've got their salutation, and their heading, and then they have the body, and then their ending here. So this student wrote, both of you have a dark hair color and dark eye color. These traits are determined by my genes. Here's the definition piece, which are segments of DNA carrying instructions to make a specific protein. I inherited these traits, which are dominant in our family, from the two of you. Since both of you carry dominant traits, it's likely your offspring will too. And that's why the three of us, I'm assuming siblings, have dark colored hair and eyes. Environment has an effect on phenotypes, and I haven't spent much time in the sun, so my skin tone isn't as dark as you both exhibit. Okay. So kind of fun. The student talked about how the environment can affect some of our phenotypes, what we see. So as we think about skin color, you know, your natural skin color is going to be an inherited trait, but we know that the environment can change that. If you spend a lot of time in the sun, yeah, you can change your skin tone, you can darken it, but it's not going to be permanent. If you don't go in the sun anymore, your skin will go back to its natural color. So it's not an inherited trait. Here we go, the next part. Siblings don't look identical because sometimes one child gets the dominant trait that masks the recessive trait, and the other receives two recessive traits. The human body has thousands of genes and only 46 chromosomes. Genes and chromosomes, which are condensed structures composed of DNA and proteins, are found in the cell nuclei. They influence your physical appearance. Also, they influence your sex. After mating, the female parent donates an X chromosome and the male donates either an X or Y chromosome, determining the sex of the baby. I received 2 X chromosomes from the 2 of you, making me the lady I am today. Cute. Love my genes. Thank you. Your daughter, Sam. Okay, so in there, let's go over what, did they hit the points of the assignment? They did. So they talked about dark hair color and dark eye color being dominant traits in their family. They defined what genes are and DNA. Okay. They even added a little part of there about the environment. They went over siblings, how they can be different. And then they talked about, the number of chromosomes we have, 23 pairs or 46 total chromosomes. Yeah, they did a good one, huh? There's a couple more examples. This particular student did more of the kind of informal, kind of bulleted out each one of the responses, okay? So kind of each section answers the requirement. If you want to take a look through that one. So again, how you kind of showcase your learning can vary. We can modify an assignment to kind of better fit your needs or suit your needs. If you like to write, go for it. If you're more like me, I'm more of like the science brain. Just let me list out, answer the question. And that's fine with me too. Okay, I'm gonna skip over that one because I want to make sure we have enough time if there is some questions. Okay, so kind of since you guys are kind of new to the live sessions, that's kind of how a live session kind of goes, as we do kind of a little bit of direct instruction on a particular topic in one of the courses, and sometimes I vary. Last week I did earth science and I looked at plate tectonics, and this week I'm looking at biology and doing genetics. And then we open it up forward to kind of question periods. This is where if you have a question about an assignment, you're not sure what to do, or you want me to explain some more, this is where you could come and just, unclick your microphone or type into the chat box and you can get your questions answered kind of right then and there, which is kind of nice. Okay, so that's how it goes. So do you guys have any questions, either about genetics that we've been talking about or something that you're working on? While you guys are thinking, again, you can unmute or you can chat. I'm gonna just take some notes down here because I know some of you guys are doing that little punch card thing, so I want to make sure I document who joined today, which is pretty cool. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so again, like I was saying, if you have suggestions in your science courses, if you're thinking ahead to maybe next week and you have an idea for a topic or you want to see something else that goes with science, let me know. I'd love to get input from students. Thank you about what might be helpful for you. Okay. And always, as you guys are going through your courses through the week and you're going through the different lessons and the different topics. Please, if you're getting stuck on something, don't let that frustration take over. Send an email, send a chat, whatever your preferred method, or if you use Google Voice, you know, your teachers, all of them are going to be very responsive. They're all here. We're all here to help and support you guys get through these courses and earning your credit. At the same time, learning all about science too, or other topics. Okay, guys. Well, I've got the attendance here. So again, thanks again for joining. How fun. Thank you guys for your feedback and your interaction here. It was nice to have. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And again, I will be back on for science on Tuesday. I want to say that there is another one later on this week, I think that Mrs. Harper's doing. I'm not sure, but I will be here next Tuesday. Again, you can check your dashboard and it'll kind of show you which sessions are coming up, and you are free to join any of them. But okay, good luck in your courses, good luck in science, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great day, okay? Oh, have a good night. Yeah, we're still, I'm on Pacific time, still in the middle of the day for us here. Take care, you guys. Have a good day. Oh, thank you. I said I did a great job explaining. Awesome. That's what I'm here for. That's what we do. Sometimes it's so much easier to, you know, say it out loud than to read it, right? As you go through your courses.